Ready.
All right. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is part 2, Food is Medicine. For those who have been with us from the very beginning, we hope that you enjoyed our first session, Food is Medicine. This is part 2. And again, we welcome Dr. Davis, one of our favorites in this area. So for today's topic is really to expand on what we talked about last week with Dr. Wilson. And again, I hope that, you all enjoyed it. So before we get started, I want also to emphasize that, if you have any questions, please utilize our chat room as well as some comments on Facebook Live. We are live streaming for our live streamers out there. Thank you again for being our loyal audience. So let's get started. So why is food medicine? Why should we think of food as medicine? And that's why we're here. So Dr. Davis can really dive deep in and give us some, open it up as a conversation and give us some details and what we should consider, and what we should really think about before we get into it. All right. Let me show a video here before we get into the actual presentation. Bear with me while I pull it out. I'll share that with us. Right, sound. And it's a 2-minute video here. All right.
Craved to eat food, and other times didn't have an appetite, but was advised that you had to eat. But why do we have to eat food? We need to eat food to get energy, nutrients, vitamins, and minerals for our body to function properly. Different foods give us a variety of nutrients. Some foods have more nutrients than others. Foods like bread are good sources of carbohydrates which give us energy. Beans and meat are good sources of protein which help to build our muscles. Avocados, butter, and cheese are good sources of fat which give us energy, great for cell growth, and keep us warm. Fruits and vegetables have lots of vitamins and minerals which play hundreds of roles, such as supporting the immune system, healing cuts, and helping with healthy skin and hair. Water is also important to keep hydrated and help transport nutrients to the body. So next time you are about to eat, now you know why. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for more videos like this.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residence.
All right, let's get back to our screen now. All right, let's get back to our screen here. All right, Dr. Davis, let's dive deep in here. Here we have it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Anita, again for having me, and thank you all for attending this awesome and wonderful topic. I'm so excited to be here to talk about a somewhat trending now. It's very still trending in some certain states, and also like a light bulb moment topic that has been traveling through the public health and healthcare community. So food is medicine is a trend that sits at the crossroads of nutrition and healthcare. So the world is facing a global epidemic of diet-related chronic diseases, but more and more research and experimentations are being performed with the food as medicine as an intervention to prevent, manage, and to create illnesses. So just a little bit about myself. My name is Taquina Davis, and I am currently a manager with Healthy Strategies, which is a consulting business where we actually assist with creating different models. And so one of the organizations that I consult with is McLean Health Solutions. And so they're a sector of the McLean Global Logistics. And so my job basically is to provide strategic and professional guidance to help develop this sector to be a resource and source for food as medicine organizations, coalitions, healthcare providers, payers, and community organizations. So when I've been doing this type of work, I have dived heavily into food as medicine, and so have become somewhat of a fan of learning more about it. But as you guys can see on the slide, I wanted to start off with two prophetic quotes. One is from Hippocrates, and the father of Western conventional medicine, and also a famous inventor, Thomas Edison. So as Thomas Edison stated, the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will instruct his patients in care of the human frame in diet and in the cause and prevention of disease. So Thomas Edison, we all know he was the genius who invented the light bulb, but apparently he had another light bulb moment. And when he had made this quote in reference to how he looks at food and as medicine. And so also the other quote, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So we all know that Hippocrates was the father of Western convention medicine. So he knew that diet and lifestyle played a major role in a person's health, even in 390 BC. So with all of technology, with all that has going on in this world, even in 390 BC, there was revelation that there was an understanding that diet and lifestyle plays a major role in a person's health. So he considered nutrition one of the main tools that a doctor can use. His writing emphasized that diet and lifestyle regimens were at the center of his thoughts about the responsibilities of doctors and tools for treatment. So we all know the prominent purpose of nutrition is to support the physical body itself, because Dr. Anita just showed that wonderful video in reference to why we should eat. So now we're taking another look at the restorative power of nutrition. Not only heal the body, but as it stated in the video, but also sustain life in all its wonderful dimensions, the mind, the body, which can impact movement, relationships, and all different components of our lives. Can we go to the next slide? All right, so conventional approach. So as we look at care today, what is the conventional medicine approach to disease treatment? What is the primary therapeutic agent, and what does conventional medicine focus on? So if you guys can answer this question, what is the primary therapeutic agent for disease treatment? Right? So if we look at it, drugs and chemicals. I know roughly about 90% of everybody that's watching this knows someone who is on some type of prescription or some type of their pharmaceutical drug to assist them with whatever chronic illnesses that they have. But if we look at the data, 331 million people, roughly 66% of all Americans in US use prescription drugs. More than half at least have 2 prescription drugs. So there was a Mayo Clinic study that showed utilization is high for older adults, those with chronic conditions. And most common prescriptions are antibiotics, antidepressants, and opioid painkillers. But advanced medication have saved lots of lives. So I'm not saying medication is not important, but it should be considered as an important type of care and contribution with alternative care. Everything has its respective place. Medicine has its respective place. Prescribed medicines and drugs can be somewhat costly, even though they can assist people with certain type of care, but they also can be costly. Many have different types of side effects. And I know a lot of people that take one specific type of drug, there might be some side effects to it, and then they have to take another drug to address those different side effects, right? So you need more medications to address the complications for all of these first prescriptions. So this cycle can go on and on and on and on, because if we look at the TV now, we're seeing a lot of new drugs being developed as we continue through society. But again, I say medication is important and it's necessary sometimes, because I don't want people to believe that we don't need medication. But it's important to educate patients, community members about what is sustainable, right? So we'll think about sustainability, the importance of good, healthy foods to prevent disease and maintain optimal health is a lot more sustainable than potentially using drugs, right? Medications are powerful and challenging at the same time. So I know if I have a headache, I will pop a pain pill in combination with potentially doing medication, deep breathing, because I get sinus headaches sometimes. So we have to think about how we manage care, right? So, but from a medical approach to disease, pharmaceutical drugs are the first line of treatment for most medical conditions, but food isn't, right? So if we think about that, we need to consider, how do we train our physicians in reference to what should be the first line of defense when it pertains to care? So we got to focus on the acute care, infections, trauma, and chronic diseases. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. So if we go down the timeline and just think about history itself, right? 100 years ago, we had acute infections, infectious diseases as prominent diseases. So mostly people were dying from tuberculosis, typhoid fever, and pneumonia, which focused on sick care. But because of public health, the breakthrough of public health with coding, we have coding now, pasteurization, sanitation, and nutrition systems, it helped to combat the acute infectious disease part-time. But now thinking about it now, since then, chronic disease has changed and has escalated. Because if you think about it, you can catch a cold, but you can't catch a heart attack. You cannot catch a stroke, but we can prevent them. So we're looking at care, we're looking at the trends, and we're looking at the history of how we look at illnesses, acute illnesses 100 years ago to where we are now at the chronic illnesses. Most of the chronic illnesses can be managed, right? And could be preventable. So how do we look at that type of care? What type of antidotes can we have? Instead of using pharmaceutical, let's think about how can we use food as a type of medicine, right? Because as the video talked about, food can provide different vitamins, different minerals that your body actually needs. All right, next slide. All right, so food and cancer. So cancer is the second leading cause of death in the United States, accounting for 1 in 4 deaths. And if we look here, poor dietary habits have been long recognized to be associated with cancer risk. But now scientists are uncovering the potential that certain foods can reduce the risk of specific illnesses such as cancer and diabetes. Diet is an important risk factor for cancer that is responsive to intervention. And if you look, there was a journal of the National Cancer Institute, and there was an article and a study done that showed 95% of new cancer cases were attributed to suboptimal diet. So it shows that the diet, the foods that we take in, has a huge contribution to health outcomes. And even as we looked at colorectal cancer, has the highest number of proportion of diet-related cases, roughly at 38%. But if we look at here, these numbers here, 5.2 of all newly diagnosed invasive cancers were attributed to eating a poor diet. So that shows here, all of the research shows that there is a contribution to chronic illnesses and a poor diet. All right, can we go to the next slide? All right, So researchers have found that eating too much or too little of certain foods and nutrients can raise the risk of dying of heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. So researchers have investigated the relationships of 10 different foods, all right? So 10 different foods, and those are listed there, and nutrients with deaths related to heart disease, stroke, and type 2 diabetes. So the highest percentage of cardiometabolic disease-related death, 9.5%, was related to excessive consumption of sodium. And so as we look at and think about the foods that we continually to consume on a day-to-day basis, a lot of the foods that we actually do consume, especially processed foods, have a lot of sodium. I was telling people, like a dietitian was telling me, there's even sodium in cereal. So it's very important to understand that sodium, especially if it's processed, is usually in a lot of different foods. And I know when you guys go out to eat and you guys see those little small packets of salt that's usually on the table, you got, strangely enough, that actually is the amount of salt that we're supposed to consume a day. So that small amount is what we're supposed to actually consume a day. But think about this, because we actually cook our foods, we go out and eat, and sometimes our French fries don't have enough salt on it. So think about the salt that's already on there, and then we go in and we shake a little bit more to put on there for a good seasoning. That could be increasing our sodium intake. And also, as we talked about last month about high blood pressure, we all know that usually if you have high blood pressure, your physician is going to encourage you to have a low sodium diet. So looking at not eating enough nuts and seeds as 8.5%. Right. So nuts and seeds, and I think the video showed it or not, but it gives you some those healthy fats, right? And there's also some proteins. So not eating enough nuts and seed, not getting enough seafood like omega-3 fats, vegetables, 7.6%, fruit, 7.5%, whole grains, roughly 6%, or those polyunsaturated fats at 2.3%. So an increased risk of death compared with people who had an optimal intake of these foods and nutrients. Eating too much processed meat, 8.2%, sugar sweetened beverages like any type like a soda, things that have a lot of sugar in there. So it's always good that we educate our patients or our consumers about reading labels, because that's extremely important, knowing what you're actually putting in your body. And unprocessed red meat at 0.4 also raised the risk of heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes related deaths. So the research shows, I'm just not talking just to talk. We do it. There's a lot of research that's out there. People are just always talking about the importance. And I know Dr. Wilson probably harping on the fact of different types of foods because that's what she does. And so the research, we move on the research. And then we also move on best practices. We move on evidence-based programs. So it's important that you understand that there have been people out there, researchers out there, who understand that there's a problem. There is a problem, like, why are people dying early? Why are young kids now being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes? We have middle schoolers who are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So what's the correlation? There could be many correlations. There's we think about the social determinants of health, could be access to healthy foods, healthy food consumption. It could be lack of physical activity, environment. So there's many different factors to it. But the reality is, as we talked about, obesity, you can prevent it to some degree, right? And so there's certain things that can be managed. Hypertension, it can be managed. Now, when you get more into certain stages of cancer, there is a different level. There's different type of pharmaceutical treatment that you have to take. But when it comes to that preventative management era, there's ways that we can do lifestyle modifications, lifestyle changes that we can take to prevent us from getting into that tier of having to get on pharmaceuticals, having to get on drugs, and having to manage care. Because if you become diabetic, now you have diabetes. And then what are some of the side effects of diabetes, right? Amputations, right? So we see a lot of people who are losing limbs due to the fact of having diabetes. But I had the opportunity to work for an organization where we were able to provide diabetes prevention program. And we saw a huge outcome with a lot of the patients that were participating in the program. It's a year-long program by the CDC. And we talk about nutrition. We talk about moderation. We talk about physical activity. We talk about those things that don't revolve around pharmaceuticals. We do those things that talks about lifestyle change versus then taking a pill or popping a pill. And so from that, we were actually able to see some really good outcomes. A lot of people that are pre-diabetic might be on a medication called metformin. And so now we've seen some patients that are actually off medication because they changed their lifestyle, and it worked for those particular patients. But each person is different, of course. But there's so much research, there's so much science, and it's good that Dr. Anita's having this conversation, because this needs to be harping, and it actually needs to get into different sectors of healthcare, like physicians, healthcare providers, in reference to how do we look at food as a first defense for care. All right, next slide. Sorry, I went and it was talking about all of the risk factors. All right,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Dr. Davis, do you want to take a few questions first?
Oh, yeah, I can't see the questions, but yeah.
Yes, no, I will read the questions. This person writes, I'm glad, you highlighted. Let me actually see you here first, so you can all see me. So this person writes, I'm glad you highlighted the difference between acute illnesses and chronic illnesses. And that's an area that, we need to understand how food affects both. And understanding that chronic illnesses are some of the diseases that we can control, and especially with food, that is key to taking care of ourselves as the first defensive mechanism. Can you talk about a little bit of the side effects food can also cause as a medicinal side effects on drugs?
That's a good question. And so I am not a PharmD, but I've heard that there are some prescribed medications that if you eat a certain type of food, like specifically like drinks, like an orange juice or something that have citric acid in it, it can affect some kind of complications when taking that medication. So if you are on a type of medication, I am saying do take it, because the physician is prescribed you with a medication that you need for whatever chronic illness that you have. Now, whenever you do take that medication, do your homework in reference to what are the side effects. What should you eat it on an empty stomach? Should you eat it on a full stomach? So there's different regimens, and there's different ways that physicians and PharmDs have been able to make sure that there's certain protocols when taking certain prescriptions. I personally have not had the opportunity to interact with the patient that had any issues with a specific type of food when it pertains to having to be on a specific medication. But I do know that when I was doing a hypertension management program, there was one prescription that encouraged the patient to not take it with orange juice or some type of citric drink, because just like us, PharmDs have done a lot of science thinking about how the drug might be affected with the certain types of food, but also have an open line of communication with the PharmD. Wherever you go to get your prescriptions, there's always a pharmacist on hand have a conversation with that pharmacist, take the time out and say, hey, if I take this, if I do this, what if I switch out with this? They'll reach out, they'll have the conversation with you. The biggest thing is having conversation, talking, and doing your research.
That's excellent, Dr. Davis, and I've always emphasized to all our audience that make sure you utilize your neighborhood pharmacist because they know a lot. That's the most underutilized provider. Now,
Yeah.
there's a I don't know whether this is a comment or a question. This person writes that explains it when you are hypoglycemic and you end up in the hospital. So then they have to give you some kind of orange juice or something, a juice that's high in sugar, to bring your glucose up. Would that be also considered as a food, as medicine?
Well, and I'm not going to be able to answer that specifically because every person's response to everything is differently, because there's different variables to if a patient is either diabetic, right, pre-diabetic, and then if they're actually on prescriptions, because people can, I've been in a situation where I've been in a location where a person was there, you could tell that their blood sugar was low, their face was pale. And then I had to ask those specific questions, like, what were you doing? Did you eat? And so this patient, it's not a patient, but she was a community member. I was out and about, and she gave blood, right? And then she was exercising, and of course her blood sugars were gonna get low because in the video it showed you that carbohydrates help with energy. It's an energy source, so she had no energy source, and so her blood sugars went down. And so I had to sit down and ask her specific questions if she was pre-diabetic or diabetic. So that was not the case, so we just needed to put some food in her stomach, right? And then she felt better, of course. So you have to, if you're a community member, if you're a healthcare providers know what to do, but even if you're out in the community, you should be able to ask those specific questions. And that's one question that you might want to ask. And also another question you might want to ask are you allergic to a specific type of food as well? Because the last thing you want to do is have a patient that's, their sugar levels are low, and then you feed them something and then they're allergic to that. So then that's another issue on top of another issue. So
this is actually an excellent conversation. I'm thinking now of all the different regimens that we have in our homes. When you're sick and your parents have to tell you, or maybe take if you have, let's say for instance you have a cough, right, take a spoon of honey, or why don't you use garlic every single day, because that helps you maintain something, or turmeric. That's very interesting. And I'm glad we're really having this conversation, because a lot of our preventive measures are in our homes and we don't even know that.
You think, if you get deeper into it, you think about the generations, like thinking about even from different cultural perspectives, and thinking about my grandmother, right? When we got sick, she pulled out a jar. She didn't pull out Robitussin or anything. She pulled out a jar where she mixed herbs together. And my dad and I, we were talking about that, and it just knocked it right out of you. Because also there's research out there that shows the benefits of cinnamon and helps with insulin, right? Sugar. There's research that shows that turmeric has an effect on inflammation. Like probiotics help with gut health. And we know, like, the immune system, a large percent of our immune system is in the gut. So there's research out there that shows that those type of different, natural minerals and vitamins do have a medicinal benefit to you. Like me personally, I can just speak for myself. I take turmeric all the time. I'm getting older, so I have to make sure that everything on the inside is not getting inflamed. And if it's getting inflamed, it's supposed to potentially, help. And so I do a lot of reading, and I make sure that I'm not getting the misinformation and the disinformation, because it gets a little dangerous now with, unfortunately, with social media, right? And
Yep.
but make sure there's research articles. I promise you guys, there's research articles, peer review articles that show that specific type of spices that can assist with different ailments, right? Because I do bee pollen. I take bee pollen for my sinuses. So it's just different things. Do your homework. It all depends on what path. I'm more of a homeopathic approach, a complementary alternative medicine approach for me specifically in my house. But whatever approach that you take, do the research behind it.
Yeah, and like you say, there's so much out there. We read so much. Google. All of us, we have got into habits of Googling before even you go to a doctor to actually see what's going on. What can you take? Now, let me take us back. When the pandemic just started, we had this whole concussion. I don't know if you remember that, right? Whereby, folks were mixing ginger and garlic and onions, apparently, that was supposed to, either boost your immune system. And actually, some people we have here in the state of Maryland, we have some people that actually died from that, which goes back to what you mentioned earlier, that too much of it can also do harm to you. So now that took me back then, when this particular guy who mixed up a lot of it and went into cardiac arrest, So yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation.
And I'm whoever mentioned that, that's a really good point, because too much of anything is never good, regardless if it's too much food, if it's too much water, if it's just too much sun. So always do things in moderation, because the body is equipped to deplete anything that it doesn't need. But of course, if we're just keep putting stuff in there that our body can't get rid of, then we're doing more harm than good. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Great. All right, let's get back to the slides here. There you go.
All right, thank you. So I don't know if you guys ever seen this graph. It's one of my favorite ones, and we're talking about the whole food is medicine movement, and this graph has been moved around in different locations in different areas. But if you think about food as medicine, there's various terms and phrases used to describe and discuss food as medicine. But so it's included, but not limited to, like, food as medicine, of course, culinary medicine, medically tailored meals. Many of you guys have heard of medically tailored meals, medically tailored groceries, medically tailored food packages, food for health, nutritious food referral, prescription food, and vegetable programs, and using food for disease management. So there's different terminologies out there, but the whole concept is where we're looking at different populations and how we can provide that specific population, wherever bracket that they fall in, that food should be, in addition to whatever other treatment that is provided to that patient or to that consumer, that food also should be at the forefront, making sure they have access. It's really about having access to those healthy foods, because as I stated, say that you have a hypertensive consumer, and so the physician is going to encourage them to do it's the DASH diet. So DASH, DASH, I think it's dietary approach to stop hypertension. Yeah, so that's what that stands for. And so there's research that has been used to show, like, this specific diet is really great for people that have hypertension. Of course, when we look at that, it's going to be a low sodium diet, right? And so how can we, if we have a hypertension patient that might be older, might not have access to certain things, or might not have the education or ability to go grocery shopping, how can we get those specific foods for them to be more successful with the management of their specific chronic illness. So evidence indicates that sustained dietary changes can be effective as pharmacological interventions. So food has been shown is as effective as taking medications. So in some instances, specific diet may be more effective than medications at mitigating, stabilizing, and reversing some diseases. And I don't know if you guys ever heard of the blue zones, like the blue zones in across the world. So these are some of the considered the healthiest areas. And so what they're doing, they're looking at their diet. Like, how are these people living long lives, right? What are they eating? What are their quality of life looks like? What are their environment looks like? And so a majority of those diets are, have you guys heard of the Mediterranean diet, right? So that terminology has been used a lot, which is a heart healthy diet. And I love that diet. Any other time you will not hear me use the word diet, but I look at it as a lifestyle change. So if you look at the Mediterranean, the foods that are within that diet is like very like healthy cheeses. You have like fish, fruits and vegetables, those healthy grains, stuff that we can consume on a daily basis that's not as processed as it is here. So there's a plethora of studies which demonstrates the extensive health benefits of food as medicine and indicates that the focus should not be on diet or medicine alone, right? And so how can we get this movement into our payers? So if you think about payers, thinking about those insurance companies, how can dietitians work with the patient and be able to bill and get paid for it? So that is one thing that we're seeing in this movement, is that there's no way to reimburse providers to be able to provide this service. That is the hugest barrier right now, but they're in the process of being able to look at that. And of course, with the conference that President Biden and Vice President Harris had in last September, I want to say it was last September, then it talked about this food as medicine movement, how they're investing funds and how they're investing the time to look at the impact food has on people's lifestyle. Healthcare systems, how can we work with healthcare systems to say, hey, you have a patient that might not have access to healthy foods, or you have a patient that's diabetic, other than thinking about putting them on medication, why can't we think about working with partners to provide the patient with healthy access to healthy foods? Biggest thing is working with community-based organizations, because they're out in the community, working with food banks, working with food distribution companies and academic institutions. And when you have academic institutions on board, then you can put the science behind all of that stuff. Next slide.
Great. Let me just make a quick comment, Dr. Davis, when we look back, from, to our ancestors, they lived longer. They weren't taking all these medications, over-the-counter medications that we're taking. And now, like you said, at least, 1 in 3 Americans is consuming over-the-counter medication, a lot of medication, right? So back then, our ancestors, we're talking about, maybe 200, 400 years ago, they weren't taking that. And they were living longer. They were much more healthier. We hardly had of all these diseases. Now we see it today. So, that really makes a lot of sense with all these foods that are being engineered with all these additives that we're taking. It just makes me think, and everybody loves food. I love to eat. I love to eat.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And you got to think about society, you think about the culture. And of course, we're in a culture now where everything is, let me open up my phone, let me order it online. They can bring it to me, right? I don't know what they're putting in it, but I don't have enough time to actually go to the grocery store. I mean, you have people that can grocery shop for you, right? So it's to the point where you have access to literally everything with the palm of your hand, versus to when our grandmothers were here, and all we got to do is go back to at least 2 generations. My grandmother, she worked out in the fields, right? And so during that time, they had like 5 or 6 kids. Why? So that they can be laborers in the field, because they were actually producing their own foods. So my grandmother's from Virginia. So in the area that she grew up in, there was a lot of potatoes. So in the summer times, I went to go visit her. What do we eat? A lot of potatoes. We ate a lot of potatoes because it was right there. But that was the process. Like, everybody would get up in the morning. You get the kids together in the morning because they knew they had a job to help bring in for the family the foods that my grandma was going to prepare for them, but they got it from outside. Right now, granted, they didn't have all of the chickens and the pigs and the hogs. Now, on my other side of the family, my grandfather was a farmer. So I can remember him having rows and rows of everything. He had watermelon, he had peas, he had hogs, he had chicken. I remember my grandmother going out, wringing the neck of the chicken, killing the chicken, plucking the feathers off, and then that was how she ate, right? And so think about that. Just think about how society has changed. It's changed so much in reference to access to foods, how we look at foods, and how the preparation of food has shifted to some degree. So it's very important that we as health education and health professionals to educate the people that we work with about food itself, right? The video that you showed, let's show some more of those. Like, how can we create some that are culturally competent to specific cultures, right? Because if you think about, culture plays a huge impact on how we eat and what we eat. And you can probably speak on that in reference to coming from, originating from Africa, right? And my diet is different from growing up in the South. I mean, if you come down here during the fair, Dr. Anita, everything is fried. They fry cookies. They fry donuts. I'm like, aren't donuts already fried? We fry everything. Like, it's fried on top of fry. They fry a stick of butter. So you have to think about the geography and think about the different cultures, and how do you have that pool of people and make it specific for that geographical location, and also for the culture. So it's a lot of work to do. We're always going to stay in business, unfortunately, because as I stated, the way that our culture is, everything is, I want it now, and I know I can get it now, so I really don't have to think about it. Let me just push a button and it will be given to me.
And you're right. I mean, you're right about that, and I'll tell you this, growing up, I remember, back home, I never got sick. The only thing, the only time I got sick, if it was maybe malaria or I have typhoid. But coming here, I've been in the country over, 30 years now, I get sick. We never got sick with this. Every little thing you're getting sick, then you're running straight to your pharmacy, getting over-the-counter medication. But home, everything we ate came from the ground. We grew our own foods, and and I remember never having to worry with cavities, going to the dentist until I came to the United States. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting that you said that, because I read I don't know if I read an article, or I read this a long time ago. If you look, there was a indigenous community. I don't know what type of what indigenous tribe or what it was. They did research on this indigenous tribe, and they had no cavities. None. I'm talking about people that are 80 or 70 or 80 years old, no cavities. Why is that? It has to be some of the foods that what they're eating. And so it only makes sense. I had the opportunity to be a foreign exchange student in Costa Rica years ago. And I remember the thing that I loved that I remembered was in the morning, my señorita, she would have fresh fruit in the morning. I was just like, oh my God, this is nice. It was refreshing because in the South, I had grits and sausage every morning, right? So in the South, I was like, my mom would make grits because that's what you eat when you're in the South. You eat grits, which I think grits has no nutritional value, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it was refreshing. I went to another country in a different culture, thinking about the location, right? It's a tropical location, like what's plentiful in that location. So like mangoes, pineapples. And I can remember every morning she would provide me with papaya. And it's to this point, like I can still feel like it was yesterday, but the experience was, oh my goodness, this was totally different, but it was so fulfilling and it made me feel good to be able to function throughout the day. And not that I was trying to lose weight, but like I actually lost weight while I was there. Usually people go away and gain weight, but when I was there, I lost weight because I was walking places. I was outside looking at different things. And then the food that I ate, like the black beans, the different types of rice, but it was different.
It's definitely different because, when you talk about weight, right? And of course with the food, there's a healthy weight and that's unhealthy weight. You can tell the difference, So, but anyway, let me move on to to the next slide here. All right. So, this one, you can't out exercise a bad diet. And when you talked about the diet, I know a lot of people don't want to hear that. The 4-letter word diet, because I feel like diet, the word diet is very for some it sounds like shaming that, oh, now I have to go on a diet. So I personally like to use the word weight management, which is a little bit more, it's more kind, it's softer, and everybody wants to hear that. Yeah, I'm managing my weight, but diet. But anyway, so what can we say about, the weight management and exercise and all those things we need to do in addition to food itself?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I appreciate the terminology that you use, because when you use certain words, it has a negative connotation. And of course, when you think of diet, you're thinking of restrictive or prescriptive, right? And when I hear that, I'm like, what? I can't eat something? So when you say management, it's like, okay, well, let me manage what I'm currently eating. Let me be mindful eating, right? Let me be mindful what I'm doing. So like I appreciate the fact that you mentioned terminology, but of course, well, we all know that when it comes to physical activity, your physician or anybody within the healthcare field would encourage you to get at least 150 minutes a week. So that could be roughly like 30 minutes out of the day. And if you look at the big number, 150 minutes a week, you can be like, TQ, I do not have that amount of time. You have lost your mind if you think I'm going to get 150 minutes a week. That's totally fine. What you can do is you can break that number down, right? So how can you get 30 minutes into your day? TQ, still, I can't. 30 minutes. I got kids. I work full time. They're part of basketball. They're doing this, A, B, and C. And I totally get it because I understand that life is life and we have to be able to function in life. So now how do you break that 30 minutes down within your day? Right. So are you able, right, to get up at least 15 minutes earlier to either move around, pop in a nice little 10-minute video that you can do to recharge your body, or just do some stretching exercises? So the whole concept is just for you to get your heart rate up, right? You don't have to go outside and run. You don't have to sprint. We just want you to be able to look at it as moving, like outside raking your yard, right? My grandmother, she is 80, no, she's 93, and she still goes outside. She tries to. She'll go outside and she'll physically take her hand and pull the weeds, right? So she's still trying to be physically active, which is good for somebody her age. right? So she's still moving around. She still has that mindset to let me get outside, let me do something versus sitting inside the house, sitting down all day. So you will have to retrain our brain on how we look at that. So, and even at lunchtime, right? So we all block out time to eat. We all do it because I know I do it too. And that stomach start growling. I'm like, I got to eat. So what can we do? How can we add in 10 minutes there? So can we take lunch a little bit earlier and shave off at least 10 to 15 minutes to go walk outside at your work location? One thing that I used to do was I used to set my alarm on my watch about 10 minutes for each hour. And then I would grab a coworker and I would say, hey, let's go and go up these stairs real quick and come back down. So I would do that. It would hold me accountable and also get somebody up and out. And so if you have somebody next to you, then you're going to be more encouraged to want to go, right? So just trying to figure out how do you incorporate movement, not exercise, but how you incorporate just being able to move to get your heart rate up. And then another thing that I do personally is my kids and I, we love to dance. So we will, the other day we were doing the Michael Jackson Thriller video. My son loves Michael Jackson. So we will play the Thriller video and we will be in the room doing one of these numbers until the point that we're just moving around and just having a good time. So physical activity and nutrition goes hand in hand, very much so.
I mean, I totally agree with you. And one of the things, now that I'm approaching the 50, the big 50, one of the things that I told myself not to put myself on, strict regimen, but moving. I have to move. I literally have to move because we know that as you get older, things start slowing down, you don't want to do much, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be moving every single day. I got to move. Yes,
yeah,
I do. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. And then one thing, especially for seniors, because I do teach like a senior class every once in a while. I usually encourage seniors, you know what, just look over your shoulder. Because as we get older, we're always looking forward and we never look over our shoulders to the point where we lose range of motion in our spine. Right. Mm-hmm. So just making sure we rotate because as we get older, our range of motion gets limited. And so any type of way that you can move, granted, you don't have to be like a rubber band. I know I was stretching this morning, bending down, touching my toes. I was just like, oh my goodness, really? Is this really happening to me? When back in the day when I was 20, I could just go down there for 30 minutes and just stay there. But just as long as you can, just work your way up to do something, just moving around, rotating as many joints and as many muscles as you can. That is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
All right. So the last slide is I just want to just confirm that you guys, all of this stuff that I've talked about, it works. It really, really works. So this is just a diagram of some of the emerging research that it demonstrated that connecting people with complex health conditions to food as medicine individual interventions is effective, and it's low-costing strategy to improve health outcomes, decrease utilization of expensive health services, and enhance patient quality of life. So even if you looked at some of these outcomes, some of the numbers, 16% decrease in healthcare costs, 70% reduction in ED visits, that's emergency department visits, 50% in reduction in hospitalizations, reduction in blood glucose levels in patients with type 2 diabetes, increase in medication adherence. You look at the healthy eating index, there was a 31.4 point increase. And then there's increase in new studies to show the impact. There's more research that's being done, you guys, but there's research that supports. And I just wanted to provide you guys that there's stuff out there that shows that this whole initiative, this whole concept of food as medicine, that it really works. So, and I hope and pray that you guys were able to learn a little something new about food as medicine and knew that there's research out there that can help support the movement.
No, this is great because, when you think about, when the pandemic just started, right? Many of us, including myself, we picked up, habits, right? Habits now that we are trying to deal with, to try to, leave that behind us and do other things. And I'm going to be transparent. One of the things I did, during the pandemic, you're inside, you're on Zoom all day long, you're teaching from a virtual platform. Really, the only thing that you literally did with families, maybe go for a walk or bike ride or play. I played a lot of tennis with my family. But then I also drank a little bit. I increased my drinking, and I'm like, oh my God. It became actually I realized it was becoming a problem, you know. So coming December, they decided, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna do this. I don't think I'm gonna take a drink now. I will not take a drink. Let's see what happens. So between December 31st and now, I weighed myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm 10 pounds less. This is good. This is very
Yay.
good. You know what? Those habits, again,
Yes.
food, changed how I ate. I'm not a dieter. I don't diet, however, I'm very mindful with what I eat. And
Yeah.
some of us, and especially, where I come from, when you look at our plates here, we do have the myplate.gov, the 9-inch plate.
Yeah.
Our plates they don't look like that.
Yeah,
Our
I know.
plates are mountains,
Yeah, I know.
So,
I know.
4 pieces of chicken, rice, all of that. I'm like, okay, that's a whole lot. That's too much. That's a little bit too much. But anyhow, there's a lot, I think, reading, learning is an ongoing thing. And, sessions like these are wonderful sessions. We've had very good feedback from folks that we should continue doing this. And of course, having you, Dr. Davis, this is amazing. This is amazing. And we should definitely continue doing that. So I will also give kudos to my students who are on this call. I'm hoping that they're taking away a lot from this, because I'm sure, some of you would end up being nutritionists for tomorrow. And this is a good learning lesson, see where it takes us. Food is really medicine. It is medicine, despite the fact that, some of our friends, family, and everybody else who's going through a hardship. Food is hard. It's expensive. Everywhere you go, food is very expensive. I was actually talking to my sister yesterday back home, and she said that there's a lot of drought. And so there's not enough food. When the farmers finally bring in food to the markets, the prices are like not tripled, but more than that. And so it becomes very difficult for people to afford, the foods that, should prevent all these diseases. Even here in the United States, we have that. We see that all the time. But yeah, yay.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoy speaking with you, and I thank you for always giving me the opportunity, and also appreciate the students for doing the hard work that you guys do. And I want to say best of luck to your endeavors whenever it comes to your professional endeavors. You guys are all awesome. They have great leadership with you, because Dr. Anita is really great to help you get to the next level. And of course, Dr. Anita, if you guys ever need me for anything, you can always reach out to me.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis. You have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye. Bye.